Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for joining. For those of you who just hopped on and are seeing my face for the first time, I'm Andrew Norman from ShipStation, and I'm hosting these sessions on the final day of Tamebay Live. For those of you that have been on, you'll feel like I'm nagging you now, but I just want to give some reminders on housekeeping and some suggestions so you get the most out of these sessions. Please do make use of the networking areas on the Totem platform, such as the coffee tables. Please do talk to our partners and the sponsors, and the people who have from their teams for any questions you have. And during the session with Martin, please do submit questions. This session is going to run for 50 minutes, like the other sessions that you may have jumped on already or been on. 40 minutes of presentation, then we're going to 10 minutes of Q&A at the end. So we're going to run up to 50 minutes. So with that, I'd like to introduce Martin Bish, who's the CEO and founder of Habu. And I was reading through Martin's background. It's quite an interesting background, and sounds like you've done a lot of great things. So Martin's got decades of experience in development and tech, and he began his career as a games programmer, publishing his first game at the age of 16. So good to see you started young and your success has continued. And then there's obviously a theme for dating, online dating sites. Sounds like you've had some fantastic success creating, I think, the first UK online dating site. And then you sold another business, I think, in 2012 to Europe's largest independent dating site at that time. And then obviously Martin's gone on to more recent things, as well as founding other tech companies and founded Habu in 2017 to bring pan-European fulfillment options to multi-channel merchants. I think there's going to be, as we were chatting before we jumped on, I think there's going to be a lot of questions from the audience, Brexit and other things that have happened over the last 3 to 4 months, I think has made that distributed inventory in different locations and different countries a very, very relevant topic. So we're delighted to have you, Martin, and we're looking forward to your suggestions and your observations. So I'll let you jump in at this point, Martin.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks for the introduction. It's very kind. My background is in tech, as you say, but I've been doing this now for a few years. I set the business up with Paul Dodd, who's my co-founder. His background was very much in logistics, and we've been running this together ever since. So the theme of this is obviously growing your business with outsourced fulfillment. I imagine most of the people that are listening here are doing fulfillment. If they're running a business, they'll be managing that themselves or working with another outsourcing company. So I hope to give some advice on what the benefits are. Those people that it might suit, but also those that it might not, because I don't think it's necessarily for everybody. So there's some consideration to be given as to whether it's really the right move for you. Do a background on Habu, founded in 2017, as Andrew kindly mentioned. It's a very fast-growing business. We've grown about 50 times the size we were 2 years ago, and we now have about 1,000 clients of all sizes. We onboard about another 50 clients a month, so it continues that kind of speed of expansion. So we get to see a huge range of e-commerce clients, more than most fulfillment companies who tend to work only at the larger end, and so see a small selection of larger clients. And we work with clients across pretty much all channels. So I'm going to cover these topics. So what is outsourced fulfillment? Who can benefit from it? How does it work? When should you outsource? And of course, when shouldn't you? And then how to choose the right partner. And crucially, and I think this is probably the one where I might spend most of my time, number 7, making it work, because there's a lot to think about if you're going to make fulfillment, external fulfillment, outsourced fulfillment work for you. And then take a quick look at fast tracking international growth. So straight to the first one. And for anybody that's using outsourced fulfillment already, this might be kind of obvious, but for everybody else, I think it's worth covering. So outsourced fulfillment is just taking the storing and the picking and the packing and the posting of your goods and doing that for you. So typically there would be integrations involved. A fulfillment company would integrate with your channels. So if you're on Amazon, eBay, and say Shopify, it would integrate with those 3 channels. And as the transactions come down from those channels, as people buy stuff on your sites, those integrations would bring those transactions into the warehouse, where the items would be picked, packed, and posted, and obviously packed in whatever way you've pre-agreed, if there's bespoke packaging or a particular approach, and then shipped out over via logistic partners. And then you'd have a typically some sort of dashboard, which will give you some analytics into your account and some billing information. The better companies will give you real-time billing information, so you're going to know on a daily basis exactly, or even an hourly basis, exactly what it's costing you to utilize their services. And that kind of transparency will also allow you to respond quickly if you see something that you don't like. It's using a service you didn't want to use, or you're concerned about the costs. You'll have all the information to hand. So it's simply that. It's pretty much all you'll be doing for yourself right now, but packaged up by a third party. So who can benefit from third-party fulfillment? And there are a number of questions that kind of help you decide whether it's something that would work for you. So the first question is, how complex is your fulfillment? So lots of companies, particularly smaller companies that can afford to do this because they're doing the fulfillment themselves, will have a real highly customized approach to fulfillment. They might have handwritten notes that go into each packet to thank people for shopping to them. If you've got a highly customized approach to fulfillment, then third-party fulfillment could be a challenge. It's not the end of the world. You can look at ways of doing something that's equally effective, that also makes your customers feel great, but isn't so intensive or doesn't require you to be involved in that process. But you're going to have to think about that before you decide on whether you can outsource that fulfillment. And it's not just about the wrapping process, but also the product itself. If you have a highly customized product, if you're printing stuff on a bespoke basis for clients that come into you, then it may be a challenge. Or if it's a very intensive kitting process. So we had a client that wanted to work with us last year, really big client, the kind of client that you'd like, but they had a plant business, and the kitting process was essentially taking the seedlings and planting the seedlings and filling up the pots with earth and different kinds of earth, depending on the seedlings. It was a fantastically complex process. We'd have pretty much had to establish about 70% of what their entire business consists of to be able to take on their fulfillment. For us, that wasn't the right thing to do. And it probably wouldn't be for most fulfillment companies. For them, I think they just had to come to terms with the fact that was a big part of their business, and probably too complex and also too vital to their entire sort of supply and build chain to outsource. The second question is, where's your focus? If you come from a massively operational background, you might be perfectly happy looking at the fulfillment side yourself. That may be something you're quite comfortable with. In which case, it may not suit you to outsource it. If on the other hand, you're about product, you're about channels, you're about marketing, in that case, you don't really want to spend your time building a large fulfillment operation. So that you're definitely a candidate for outsourcing fulfillment on that basis. And then finally, what are your ambitions? I mean, if you really don't ever want it to grow beyond being, a little business that pays your bills and never does much more than that, it may be that you can handle fulfillment in-house. Maybe you need a part-time employee to help you. And that might be a really nice way to do it. You keep everything close, you keep complete control, and you're not looking to scale. So you're not going to run into some of the problems that 3PLs solve. The only proviso I would add there is, of course, if you are doing all of that yourself, the challenge, and we found this with a lot of clients, a lot of our early clients, particularly who were on the smaller side, is that you don't get to go on holiday. And if you're running the whole thing yourself, going on holiday can mean shutting down your shop. And if that's how you pay your bills, then that can be a real challenge, of course. A few things to think about when you're deciding whether or not that really suits you. So I'm just reading a question here. If a customer orders 2 items, do we have to pay the pick, pack, and postage fees twice, even though they go in the same package? So I'm not really here to pitch Habu. So for us, you wouldn't have to pay the same fees twice. There would be a separate picking fee. So you'd have one fee for most of the process, and then another fee for the person to go and walk and pick the item. That tends to be the case with most fulfillment companies. So typically, you're going to pay for the sort of the courier fee, or that single fee that might encapsulate the first pick. Does for us, does for many fulfillment companies. And then that second pick, because it takes time, and time is the principal cost to a fulfillment company. That's where you would pay second, third, and fourth. But it does vary somewhat from fulfillment company to fulfillment company. How does outsourced fulfillment work? So if you've made the decision that your items aren't too complex, it's something that you could conceivably outsource and you'd like the benefits of outsourcing, then how do you go about doing that? Obviously, the first thing is to find the right company. And that's not difficult. You can go on Google, you can do some searches, you can ask your friends, you can look up reviews, and then have a conversation with a few companies to get some background on what they do. Make sure it's a few. Have a few conversations so that you can return to each as you better understand the propositions. When eventually you've made a decision, when you've got the prices, you're sure that they work for you, the process can vary greatly. So sign up for most fulfillment companies is going to happen as it would with most businesses that you interact with, most non-SaaS businesses. You're going to get on the phone, you're going to have a conversation, they're probably going to sign you up. At that point, you probably don't have an account on their dashboard. Eventually, they might introduce you to a CSM, someone in support that will set that up for you and help you. Our system's a bit different because it's completely SaaS, so you can just sign up and kind of see what it looks like without having to have a conversation. But eventually you will, and you'll then start to think about using the system properly, and that's when you're going to select the items that you want to fulfill. Again, it varies somewhat as to how that works. On most SaaS-based systems like ours, you're going to see all of the items from your channels in your dashboard, in your 3PL dashboard, and you're going to be able to select which ones you want that 3PL to fulfill on your behalf, which is great because you might just want to try and start with a sample. That's a good way to go. So you might choose 1 or 2 items that they can fulfill initially. And so you should be able to, with the best 3PLs, you should be able to control that on a dashboard. More old-fashioned 3PLs might not have that in place, in which case there might be an account manager. You'll have conversations, you'll describe to them what you want to do, and they'll implement that for you. And then, of course, you'll ship your goods in, and we'll talk a bit about some of what you should think about when you're doing that. They'll then, if they haven't already, integrate with your channels. So, if you're on eBay, Amazon, Shopify, WooCommerce, they'll set up integration with those channels. And again, on SaaS systems, they can be really simple, can be a single click or a couple of clicks and you're active and you can see your items. On more traditional fulfillment companies, that might be a more manual process, but at some point that integration will take place. And then as your orders come in, they'll go to the warehouse, and the warehouse will obviously fulfill those items. And you'll be able to keep up to date, as I mentioned earlier, by taking a look at the dashboards that again, most modern fulfillment companies would provide. So when should you outsource? So you're a company that has decided that it's got the right kind of products for outsourcing, but what's the right point in the life of a company to do that? And again, I think it depends on a number of factors. So if you've just started up and you're growing slowly and you feel like you can handle everything, you might be perfectly happy keeping that fulfillment in-house. And it's really not a bad place to start, because if you are new to logistics, a great way to understand logistics and be able to hold your fulfillment company's feet to the fire is to understand how the whole thing works. And doing yourself in the early days can give you that kind of expertise to know what to expect from a fulfillment company, to make sure they achieve that, and also to be realistic in your expectations. You'll realize that it's a challenging job and the occasional error will creep into your system, whatever system you build to fulfill for yourself. And you'll be less surprised when the occasional error creeps into a fulfillment company. Ideally, you're looking for a fulfillment company that will have sort of 99.9% accuracy rates, but that still means that you're going to get the odd error. So I think it can help give you a realistic sense of what's achievable via fulfillment if you do it yourself. I mean, having said that, if you're looking to scale quickly, maybe you're well funded, you've got your products and you really want to hit the ground running, then maybe you don't have the time for that. So that could be the situation where from day one, you want to get a fulfillment company in place so that you're not having to deal with the fact that you've got, your items are selling at a rate that you can't keep up with, and you've got to bring staff in and train them, and that's a huge complication that you weren't prepared for. So if you're looking at that kind of trajectory, if you're focusing on growth, then that's a time to get somebody else to help out with that highly operational, highly complex piece that requires scaling staff, scaling software, integrating with multiple channels. There's a huge amount to be understood and done. And if you're scaling at a pace that you don't have the time to understand that, then it's definitely worth thinking about getting a fulfillment company in at that point. You don't want to be let down by that piece because it's not something that you really are an expert in. If you're spending too much of your own time fulfilling orders, and that's inhibiting growth, it's getting in the way of you finding new products, new channels, that's definitely a good time to start thinking about outsourcing. New territories is another great one. Maybe you're looking at Europe now. Obviously, with Brexit, Europe is more of a challenge. We noticed in January a 10% drop in revenues. 10% of our revenues is basically where all of the European shipments go. It just stopped as people suddenly realized they weren't prepared for Brexit. They didn't know how to ship to Europe, and so they just stopped shipping to Europe. Obviously, that's not a great way. You want to scale across Europe. You want to get that right, and a fulfillment company can help you with that. There are also some challenges, some huge benefits to filling domestically from companies across the world, and I'll talk about some of those afterwards. So if you're at a point where you want to expand into Europe or across the world, definitely worth looking at a fulfillment partner. Apart from anything else, the massive complexities of looking for courier services across the world will be handled by a courier. There are literally thousands of different services that you could be using, all of them priced differently, all of them scaling differently, discounted differently. That's a huge piece of complexity that if you're not used to, can end up costing you a great deal of money and really eating into your margin. So avoiding that, giving that to the experts can really help. Peaks in demand. So if you're highly seasonal or you just find that you're experiencing peaks that you can't deal with, very regular peak actually that most e-commerce companies have to get to grips with very early on. It's just Monday. If you're not working 7 days a week, then Monday you're shipping Saturday and Sunday's orders as well as what's coming early on Monday morning. That, depending on what you're selling, can be 2 or 3 times your normal shipments. So dealing with those weekly peaks and then dealing with any kind of seasonality, that's the sort of thing a fulfillment company is prepared to do. That's the bread and butter of a fulfillment company. So you can do away with, not with working on the weekends or with the hellish Mondays, or with figuring out how do you deal with staff when you need twice as many staff on a Monday as you do, Tuesday to Friday, or do you have to now start running a 7-day-a-week operation? All of these questions, the questions you need never ask if all you're thinking about are channels and product. So you can really avoid becoming a 7-day-a-week operation by outsourcing. Running out of storage space, we get this quite a lot. Someone has a warehouse, but it's full up. Instead of buying yourself a bigger building, you can just outsource that whole piece. That's a big chunk of capex you don't have to expend, and of course you don't then have the complications of that piece of scaling. And finally, if you're just facing a backlog of orders, so we get quite a lot of customers or clients. They've reached the point where they've done a fantastic job. They have amazing products. They really know what they're doing with marketing, but they just can't keep up with that operational piece. So we took on a client recently, a pretty big client. They sell earbuds. They're a fantastic client. Their products are wonderful. And they were shipping out orders that came in on Saturday, the next Wednesday. And obviously that's not a great service for their clients. So if you just feel like it's something you're not really on top of anymore, that's a great time to consider outsourcing as well. To sum up some of the reasons why you might think of doing it, I'm going to come back to the first one last because in many ways it's the more complex one. But managed returns can go to the fulfillment company. It's not a problem for you. They can process them in any way you need. They can test them before putting them back on the shelves. Most fulfillment companies can adopt whatever rich process of returns you might have in place to make sure that they're doing what you would do, but they can scale that. Focus on product reach and growth, as I mentioned. Customer service, making sure you get it delivered on time. That's the core of customer service. If you can't do that, it really doesn't matter what else you're doing for your client. Expanding your reach, we discussed technology. Enhanced fulfillment is kind of interesting because e-commerce is obviously a technology business. It's there are warehouses and people and staff involved in it, but fundamentally it's a business that starts off with integrations and shop systems and that kind of stuff. If you're not really a tech, you need to work with people who are, and that's something you really need to think about when you're looking at who to work with. If you think about fulfillment, it really hasn't changed for most fulfillment houses in the last 20 years. Their warehouses look pretty much the same. They buy in third-party software rather than building anything themselves, and that will limit the extent to which they can change or adapt. You really want to work with a technology company, a company that is constantly adapting to the realities of e-commerce, not simply commerce. Saving time, we've already covered. And the last one, saving money. That's not always true, but it is often true, and it's often a surprise to our clients. So we have highly optimized systems, as all good fulfillment companies will. So we're typically doing things better and faster than the clients that we work with. And that's not because they couldn't do it as well as we do. It's because their focus is elsewhere. So this is what we do. This is what fulfillment companies do. We obsess about it. We perfect it. We ideally do it faster and better than companies that don't focus on that. That delivers us a margin that often means that we will cost similar and sometimes less than it costs a company to do that fulfillment piece themselves. It's not always true. It depends on what you're doing, but it often is. So it's something worth looking at and worth considering. It needn't cost you more to get external fulfillment, or if it does, it needn't cost you so much more that when it's offset against the time that you buy back, the time you buy back to find more products, to do more marketing, to not have to manage a growing operational business, it kind of pays for itself. How to choose the right fulfillment partner. I mean, this is if you decide to go for fulfillment. Sorry, I'm just keeping an eye on time. If you decide to go for fulfillment, this is obviously really crucial. So the first thing is speak to a number of them, and then go back to the ones you spoke to before with what you learned from the ones you've spoken to more recently. Sorry, I was just reading a question there. These are the kinds of things you're going to want to ask questions about and then want to iterate over. So flexibility in pricing is a really important one, pricing being fundamental. That price is going to come straight out of your margin. So you've got to make sure that it works for you. In fulfillment, what that typically means is really nailing the small print. Most fulfillment companies, especially traditional fulfillment companies, can have as many as 50 to 20 different prices they charge you for different phases of your interactions with them. There are fulfillment companies that will charge you for every support email they send you. So you write to them asking whether or not a shipment has arrived. When they write back to you, they charge you for that. There are companies that will charge you for every single item that you ship in. So you ship in 10,000 of a particular SKU, and they'll charge you for each one of those 10,000, and all sorts of things besides. So make sure that you get an exhaustive list, demand an exhaustive list from any company you're considering working with. And when you start comparing prices, make sure that you're looking at all of those prices and their impact, and not just the picking, packing, and shipping prices, because it's often the others that will make all the difference. So it's really key that you look at pricing. Tech focused, I've already looked at to some extent. It's just vital now. You're going to find a lot of companies that are outsourcing their courier integrations, their channel integrations. It just means that they can't be as flexible. They can't move as swiftly as a company that's doing all of that kind of stuff themselves. You want a company that thinks of themselves as a tech company first. Accuracy goes without saying. If people, if the company can't ship the item that you want to the person that you want within the time frame that you've agreed, then it's going to destroy your business in the end. That's the core service, the core of customer service, really, for you. So make sure that you've got examples of their accuracy. Ideally, talk to some of their clients. Ask them to introduce you to some of their clients, people they've been working with for a while, who can tell you what they do and where they succeed and where perhaps they don't do quite so well. Packaging options. Explore those. Make sure that that you're getting decent costs on the packaging options, and that they're going to be able to package these items in the way that you want them to. And location. Make sure that they're located in the places that you want to be, or at the very least they can deliver to those places, say globally, at the kind of price that you want or you're happy to ship at. So those are some of the things to think about when you're looking for a partner. This is really a key one, I think, because now we work with about 1,000 clients at Habu. So we're not a massive company. Normally, a company of our size and turnover would have maybe 100 clients, maybe less. Because we work with so many clients of so many different sizes, we have some big clients and lots of middle-sized clients and lots of much smaller clients as well. We get a real sense of expectations and of the various ways that clients can approach fulfillment. It's really important that you get off on the right foot. So, for instance, we often find that clients will exaggerate to get a better deal. Get off on the right foot. Be really clear about what you're doing right now. Your pricing is going to be based on that, which is why it can be tempting to say that you're doing more. And also, as an entrepreneur, I think every entrepreneur has a tendency to round up and to think about what we're going to earn rather than what we're earning now, what we're going to turn over, what we're going to ship. But it's really important that for the fulfillment company, you're clear about what you're really doing now. You can show them your projections and give them reasons to believe in those projections, but they need to understand what you're doing now. If you get pricing based on projections or based on numbers you're not really doing, the company will only return to you later. But it may have greater implications. I remember a shoe client that we brought on board. Shoe clients are traditionally a bit of a problem for fulfillment companies because they need so much live stock, because for every SKU they've got whatever 10 sizes and possibly 10 colors, and it means huge amounts of storage for not necessarily a huge number of shipments. This company claimed they were doing a certain number of shipments. They were doing a fraction of those shipments, and we had to let them go. So we brought them online, we onboarded them, which was an expensive activity for us and for them. And then within 3 months, when they were doing nothing like what they said they were doing the day we brought them on, we had to let them go, which was an expensive operation for them. So, and again, I don't suppose they were really being dishonest. They were just excited by what they were doing and kind of, giving us the best numbers, the numbers that they had in their mind for what they might be doing a few weeks hence, but they didn't materialize, and that had implications for them and for us. So be really clear, and again, be clear about complexities as well, and legalities. So if what you're shipping are dangerous goods, they're nail varnish or something, be crystal clear about that. If there are processes, your concern might be expensive processes, and so you think maybe don't mention them, and you'll have them shipped and no one will kind of notice it. It doesn't work that way. All fulfillment companies are measuring all of the time that their staff spend shipping units out. It's really vital that you're clear about these things and agree a solid timeline. So the 3PL needs to know exactly when your stuff is coming. It needs to arrive then. It needs to be prepped properly in a way that you've agreed. If those things don't happen, it'll land, and then the check-in will be slower, and you won't be prepared for that because you've shipped everything to them, and it'll cause you problems. So make sure that the handover is perfectly laid out, perfectly agreed, and that you stick to it. Obviously, make sure your 3PL does as well, but you've less control over that than you have over your piece. And finally, mentally prepare yourself to loosen your grip on something that's crucial to your business. That's a real challenge. It's an emotional thing. If you haven't outsourced this before, you know that it's vital to your business. You know that if it's done badly, it has the ability to destroy your business. So you've got to work with the right partner. We've talked about how to find the right partner, but you've got to prepare yourself for that moment when they take it over. It's a tough thing, I think. So just steel yourself for when that happens, and then understand what a 3PL can't do for you. Prepare yourself for that as well. So it's no longer you doing it. They're gonna do what you've agreed. They're not gonna do all sorts of things that you do on a daily basis that you haven't really thought about, that you haven't listed because you just do it because you love your customers and you never think twice about going the extra mile. They're gonna do what you've agreed to do. So make sure that you think about what you do for your customer that is fulfillment related before you agree all that with the 3PL, so that they've got a comprehensive list of what's expected for them. And so that it's agreed, and if there's anything they can't do, you understand that, and you understand that it's probably going to be it's not going to be quite the personal service that you may have delivered if you've got a startup and you're investing in every package with a handwritten note or something of that kind. So make sure you have comprehensive list of prices we talked about. But honestly, if I put that on every frame of this, I probably wouldn't be mentioning it enough. Make sure you know exactly what you're going to be charged. And then a really important one is run a trial. So let the 3PL get set up and then get them to ship a few items to you. So you know exactly how they're going to arrive, what your clients are going to experience. And then when you're running with them, do that periodically as well to make sure they're maintaining the same standards. And then, because obviously initially, any business that wants your business is going to push hard, and then they're going to have other new clients. You want to make sure that you're getting as good a service 6 months in as you get on day one. Be your own client. Make some orders, get some stuff shipped to you, and make sure that it arrives to you as you want it to arrive to your clients. I think this might be my final one slide. So just a bit about international growth. This isn't really specifically about fulfillment, but it is about being located in those territories. So you could do that yourself. You could open an office in the Netherlands or Germany or France or wherever you want to be, of course. It's a massive expense, massive complications. Launching logistics in a foreign country is hugely complicated, much more so than doing it domestically. And frankly, that can be complex enough. but there are real reasons to do it. So if you've got a great product that could fly in Germany and you're shipping 5% of your sales there, probably one of the reasons you're not selling more is because it might take several days to get there. Or you're having to charge a great deal more for it because you're selecting a faster means of getting to Germany, but that's very expensive. So if you want to create a flat playing field where you can compete with the other companies in Germany that are selling similar products to yours, you need to be there. Only by being there can you ship as quickly, as inexpensively as your competitors. So only in being there can you really compete with them. And then that 10% you ship to Germany might end up being 20, 30, 50, or depending on the product, 200% of what you're doing in the UK. So if it's the right product to sell in a particular country, and if the country has sufficient opportunities, you need to be there, either by being there yourself or by outsourcing fulfillment. It's another great reason to outsource fulfillment. It's even more complex than doing domestic fulfillment. So those faster delivery times, the potential for expanding within that territory, avoiding the red tape, which you would certainly run into if you did it yourself, and then potentially lowering your customs and excise charges as well, are all really good reasons to outsource fulfillment if you are looking to do it elsewhere. So I'm just going to finish on a couple of examples of clients that we've taken on. They were amazing companies to begin with. We didn't make them any more amazing at all. All we did was take that piece off them to allow them to grow. So these are just some of our companies. Brave Foods doubled their order volume to 200%. Own, which is a fantastic company, had 650% growth in weekly shipments. This is nothing to do with Hubby. I want to be clear about that. I mean, we have a great service and we'll deliver you a great service if you work with us. Any great fulfillment company is going to have the same impact on these guys as we had. They're going to take that extraordinarily complex piece off of these companies and free them up to do what they do best, to market, to create products, to expand into new territories, and of course to expand into new channels. So those are some sort of solid examples of what can happen if you get this piece right. And that's it. So I can take a few of these questions.
Thanks, Martin. There's some fantastic perspectives on things. I think you're exactly right in terms of letting go of your baby and letting go of things that are quite sacred to you is probably one of the biggest hurdles that sometimes hold us back. I've got a couple of questions to start us off, and then there's some great questions from the audience too. A lot of us are obviously selling on multiple channels, and particularly marketplaces where you're governed by the metrics of Amazon and eBay, for example. You know, you're selling on their assets, right? So they kind of determine the standards that you need to operate by. So how could you, I guess, and other maybe 3PLs as well, in terms of how does your process align to the metrics of someone like Amazon and eBay for shipping time, and you know what I mean, all those kind of metrics?
I do. It's a really good question. I mean, the simple answer is that if you're going to work with people that are on those platforms, you simply have to align completely, and that's the only way it can work. And many of them aren't too bad. The really challenging ones, or the ones that have very strict policies and very challenging policies, would be things like Seller Fulfilled Prime for Amazon. So we have lots of clients that are on Seller Fulfilled Prime, and so we have the sort of delivery services and times that allow us to ensure that those items arrive on time. Of course, if they don't, that gets fed straight back into Amazon or straight back into eBay and can be massively damaging. So if you're doing that for a client, it's because you can fulfill those. And I think the key there, really, Andrew, is to make sure that when you my presentation now feels inadequate. I should have had something on there about talking to your 3PL provider, your potential 3PL provider, about the channels that you work on. Are they used to those standards? Can they demonstrate to you, ideally with conversations with existing clients, that they are delivering to those standards? There's really simply technological problems, and all you want to do as a potential client of 3PL is make sure that your 3PL can prove to you that they're meeting those standards.
Yeah, great answer. And if you sort of, on a related question, a lot of the audience are sort of selling on multiple channels, so there may even be, you know, a split model, right? They might be using FBA, they might be merchant fulfilled, and they may be using you or you know, or other 3PLs. So again, what would be, I guess, your advice or just observations of having sort of multi-threaded order fulfillment?
I mean, it's challenging. There can be really good reasons to do it. So there are certain very good reasons to use FBA, for instance. Less good reasons to split between other third-party fulfillment companies usually, but quite often clients will use FBA for their Amazon and then use another provider like us or another provider entirely to do everything else. And there can be good reasons for doing that, because FBA, of course, is a fantastic service if you're selling through Amazon. It's much more expensive if you try and use FBA to sell through eBay or one of the other channels. There are some products that don't ship so well through FBA, and there are some products that you can actually ship less expensively via some other fulfillment providers. Not many, I think, because it's challenging, but we have a couple of products that are cheaper than FBA, even if you're shipping through Amazon, but that's not common. So there are some good reasons to use FBA. I think that the downside of doing that is that you've got multiple piles of inventory. Inventory has to have a buffer, of course. You don't know quite what's going to happen with the sales. So you're buying more inventory in order to have those multiple piles, buffers in place. So it's really the CapEx that you've got to sink into those piles of inventory, and then the multiple conversations you've got to have. If you could have something that does everything you want at the price that you want, and that can be a challenge, but if you can find that, then of course it makes sense to do that, because if you've got one source of inventory, you've got one conversation to have with, one account manager or one company. That has to be the best way to approach it, all other things being equal, which, so I mentioned, they aren't always, because FBA does offer a great service.
You were, in true British style, very understated around the international side and Brexit. We, with my ShipStation household, we've seen a huge amount of merchants that have looked for 3PL partners, outside of the UK to sidestep some of the challenges with Brexit. And what would be your sort of observations, I guess, and guidance for not just for Brexit, but even having, inventory in other locations, to your point earlier of having it close to the consumer?
It's something you really want to do for the reasons that I gave. You'll just, if it's the right product to their market, you will just sell more. And so for those reasons, it makes absolute sense. It's also much simpler now, really, to ship a series of pallets over than to deal with, these things item by item, certainly within the EU. So that's another good reason for using a third-party fulfillment company. It's one of those areas where you might find you've got to use multiple fulfillment companies. Maybe your company only does the UK. So now you're stuck with those 2 piles or 3 piles, depending on how many countries you're looking at of inventory. It can get quite complicated. So ideally, you're trying to find one partner that can handle as large a territory as possible. If you can find one company that will take you into Europe and deal with the 50 countries of Europe, 27 countries of the EU, that's obviously a great way to do that. It's going to save you lots of pain, lots of management of the various companies that you'd otherwise have to deal with. Make sure they're well established. Make sure that all of the questions that I suggested asking about 3PL, make sure you're asking them about that in those particular territories. Make sure, this is a follow-on from the question you asked earlier, Andrew, make sure that you're talking to them about the channels in those territories. So you might want to go there because you're running eBay, and 10% of your eBay sales in Germany are make it worthwhile, but in moving to Germany, there are other channels you might want to consider, or moving to Netherlands, you might want to look at BOL. If you're moving to Spain, Shopify might not be the best way to go. PrestaShop or something like that, which is, I think, the #1 shop system out there, might be something worth looking at. So again, a company that's a technology company first is going to be able to answer those questions for you, and even as we do, even build an integration. So if they don't have an integration in place, a good modern fulfillment company should be able to build that for you fairly quickly. So those would be some of my thoughts.
Yeah, great, big question. Thanks for trying to break that one down. I got some questions from the audience, so I'm just going to fire away with these if that's cool. How do returns work? I get lots of returns as I sell fashion items. If they come to you, can you make decisions on whether a product is sellable after return? So that's basically about grading, I guess, and disposal and repatriation of products.
Yeah, you should find that most fulfillment companies will do whatever you want the returns piece to be. Depending on how complex it is, of course, that will have implications for the price. We have, just thinking of the kinds of clients we've got one client that ships a huge number of hair dryers. Each hair dryer that comes back has to be tested to see if it works. And if it does, we will rebuild a fully packaged product ready to go back on the shelves. So that's a fairly extreme example where there's electronics testing and all that kind of stuff. Other simple ones are just to check the thing is still in its packaging, and if it is and the package is undamaged, it can go back on the shelf. And then if not, whether it goes to whether it's, some of our clients will have the stuff that we can't sell shipped to charity, some to landfill. All of those things we can manage for the client as long as it's pre-agreed ahead of time, and most fulfillment companies should be able to do the same.
Awesome. Next question: Do you manage the carrier? Do you manage the carrier and utilize agreements you have with this? I guess the question is, are they your rates or are they the merchant's rates, for example?
They're ours. And again, that's not true for all fulfillment companies. So you'll find fulfillment companies that will work with your contract. If that's really important to you, they're definitely out there. We don't. We use our own contracts. We ship, we ship more than our clients. Obviously, we have 1,000 of them, so we ship much more than any one of our clients, which gives us fantastic discounts, typically way beyond what any of our clients could achieve. And usually our margin sits in that piece there. So the fact that we're not using your contract won't mean that you're paying more, won't necessarily. It's something you'd need to explore.
Presumably the merchant could specify if they're rightly precious about, using a DPD or whatever, right? Could they specify the service that they wish for that order fulfillment?
Yeah, they absolutely could. Our standard services go on what we call Habu 24 and Habu 48, and then we select the service that sits beneath that. But if they want a particular service, and probably about 30% of our clients do, then we work with all the major carriers, and we can ensure that it goes out with whatever carriers or with whatever series of carriers for different products and different periods they want.
Related question: my products require two-man. This beautiful person selling pianos, that's a tough gig. So yeah, I guess what's your view on two-man, and is that a good candidate for, are things like pianos or bulky items, car parts, I guess, or whatever, are they good for outsourced fulfillment, or do you think that's too specialized?
No, I mean they are specialized, but there are companies that have two-man fulfillment. So we don't do that at all, because it is a definite area of specialization. There's no reason why you shouldn't be able to outsource that. No reason why you shouldn't be able to find a company to do that. I can't think one off the top of my head, but if anyone wants to email me afterwards, I'll definitely have people here that will have some ideas about who to talk to about that. So it's a candidate, but you'd have a narrower range of companies that you could work with.
Cool. I sell high-end quality products. Can I have branded packaging that reflects the quality of my brand if I choose outsourced fulfillment?
Absolutely. Every fulfillment company will offer branded packaging. We do it for probably something like 20 to 30% of our clients. And that can range from it going into a client's box to a 7 or 8 stage packaging process for a beauty product. Any fulfillment company will be able to help you with that. Just make sure they have all of the details before you get pricing, because pricing will depend on that, and make sure that you get examples of the fully packed items so that you're happy with it. And again, as I mentioned earlier, make sure that you're ordering something periodically to ensure that as staffing change or as time passes, that they're still doing exactly what you want.
Okay, does a retailer pay, so this is about your pricing model, I think, does a retailer pay per sale or set fee based on warehouse space taken? So I think that's probably about what's your pricing model and what's the typical pricing models that 3PLs operate, I think is the question.
Yeah, so it varies broadly, but typically 3PLs will simply charge for storage from day one. I think FBA does that, and most other fulfillment companies will do that. We're unique in that if you're sending us only enough stock to keep on the shelves, and that typically means that you might replenish once every few weeks, then we won't charge you for that stock for the 2 months that it's sitting on the shelves. So as long as it's turned around fairly quickly, you'll never get a charge for storage. We have long-term storage, which is charged for if that's something you prefer. But it means that if you turn stock around quickly, storage isn't something you have to factor in at all. But that's pretty rare. I think in most cases you'd pay for storage from day one.
Certainly, yeah, certainly with FBA. Related question from the same member of the audience. If my sales are very, excuse me, if my sales are very seasonally dependent, I guess it's another part of the question. How does highly seasonal businesses operate in your kind of model?
Yeah, so again, you won't find too many fulfillment companies happy to work with seasonal businesses unless they're very large, and then of course they're much more tempting. So it'll depend to some extent on your size as a business, or how many items you ship, and also on the basket size, the basket value of what you ship, as to how many 3PLs are going to be interested in working with you, because there are challenges to seasonal goods. But you'll certainly find people out there that will do it. We do it. We're very keen to take on seasonal business. We also work with Kickstarters, for instance, which is kind of hyper seasonality, where things just happen for 3 or 4 days, or subscription businesses, which at the beginning of every month just have this massive spurt. So you shouldn't find any challenge. But you'll be turned away from a few. You might have to shop around a bit more, but you're definitely going to find someone that will work with that. How that works will depend on the specifics of your business, whether you need to ship your goods in and out at certain periods of the year, whether they can sit there for 6 months, only to go out for the next 6 months, will depend very much on the companies you're talking to. You're going to have to nail the detail of that with some 3PLs.
A slightly more technical question about address verification. So scenario is every day we find 1 or 2 orders with an incomplete or badly formatted address. Do you ship orders directly after they're placed via integration, or is there any ability to check the addresses before posting? I guess that if we break that question down, I guess, would your advice be that you do address validation verification in the checkout, for example, or do you do it up post checkout? I think maybe that's the way to break that thing down.
Yeah, so we have some validation that takes place for malformed addresses, for addresses that just don't make sense to our systems, and then they'll be manually checked and we'll find that address. If the address is just wrong, or it's an address that makes absolute sense, but for whatever reason will not result in the item being delivered, that's not something we typically spot. So if it's something that we could be expected to understand is wrong without knowing where it should go, we would usually spot that. We get a few hundred of those address errors every single day, and they're all captured and they're fixed before they go out. But it would depend on the type of error as to whether we could capture it.
And you have databases, right, like Locate and others, right, that do that real-time address verification. So that's a service, I guess, that you can just...
Yeah, absolutely. And you'll find that things like, Shopify will be able to do that kind of stuff, or WooCommerce has plugins that does that, etc.
Awesome. Okay, next question. Does Habu have experience with fulfilling subscription boxes, monthly subscription, where the box content changes each month and often demands a higher level of personalization?
We do. So we do quite a bit of that, quite a bit of subscription for food companies, wine companies, all sorts of unusual ones. One we mentioned earlier is a tampon company that has each box consists of a different arrangement of items. So we do quite a lot of that kind of stuff. It's usually not a problem. It's mostly about timing again, and it depends how the company is managing themselves. So we just bring on a client now, and it's a fabulous client. They've structured their business brilliantly, so it's almost all subscription. But they recognize the problems that can cause for operations very early on, because they were running their own operations. And so although it's a subscription, they don't expect everything to go on the first of the month. The subscriptions themselves are staggered across the month, meaning that it's actually a much more evenly paced business than it would be if it were not subscription, but just consisted of daily sales. But then we run across companies that they want everything to go out first Monday of every month, and that can be a challenge, and it's really not a scalable model. And typically those subscription companies have to come to terms with that and start adapting. So absolutely we can do it, and most fulfillment companies will be happy to look at that kind of business. How easy it is will depend on how much thought has been given to those complexities, and we can help introduce that kind of operational thinking if it's not currently present, if the company is willing to adapt.
We only got 2 minutes left, but I'm going to ask you a big and philosophical question, I guess, for the audience. So I think, you touched on this earlier on. It's kind of the opportunity cost, right, of continuing to do your own fulfillment, and what could you do as a result of sort of mentally letting go. So I think for all of us, we're quite precious and quite sacred about some things. And what would be your advice, I guess, for letting go, if that question makes sense, and how you get onto the other side?
Yeah, I mean, how much of a challenge it is. It sort of depends on you and how risk averse you are, and how attached to that piece. But fundamentally, I think the answer is the same, irrespective of who you are. The more information you have about the company you're working with, the processes they're going to implement, the more likely you are to feel comfortable. So we have an unusual system at Habu. We build what are called micro warehouses. So our larger warehouses are broken down to smaller warehouses, and then they're run by hub managers who deal with the inbound, the outbound, the picking, the packing, the posting, and also the first line of support. And it typically means that our clients deal with the people that are doing the day-to-day for them. And that offers them a great deal more comfort than simply sending it to a support team that has nothing to do with the operations. I mean, it also means that the clients get to meet them and talk to them and know who's fulfilling that for them. But whether you work with a company that's doing that or taking some other approach, it's about trust, and that's about having enough information to feel comfortable.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Listen, we're out of time. Great to have you. Thanks for your insight and perspective. I think it's really an emotional journey for some of us, but it's definitely a very relevant one, and really appreciate your insights and perspectives on that.
Thanks, Andrew. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Good, great. Thank you again. So for everyone, we have a 50-minute break coming up. Just as a reminder for everybody, please don't forget to download contents of your delegate bag, PDFs and contact data before leaving the platform at the end of the day. This coming up next is our last session of the last day. So here we go. So I'll let you take a break, and we'll see you in 15 minutes.